Good afternoon, I'm Councillor Fred Grimrod and welcome to the Birmingham City Council Audit Committee on Tuesday the 18th of October 2022. First item on the agenda, we work through the agenda as published on the Council's CMIS website, so for anyone following at home, follow that. So the first item is to note that this is being recorded and webcast. To advise the meeting that this meeting is being webcast for live or subsequent broadcast via the Council's meeting YouTube site. All of us are now YouTubers. And that members of the press public may record and take photographs except where there are confidential or exempt items. And we may have, I need to move that into the next stage. So first up to take some apologies. I think we have apologies from Councillor Miranda Perks. I haven't had any other apologies. No, so just Councillor Perks. Declarations of interest. Members are reminded that they must declare all relevant pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests arising from any business to be discussed at this meeting. If a disclosable pecuniary interest is declared, a member must not speak or take part in that agenda item. Any declarations will be recorded in the minutes of the meeting.
My standing declaration, non-pecuniary, as far as the previous instance.
Thank you, Councillor Tilsley. Anybody else? No, in which case I will move on to item 4, which is to note to consider the exempt information, possible exclusion of the press and the public, to consider whether any matter on the agenda contains exempt information within the meaning of section 100L of the Local Government Act 1972, and where it is considered that the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information for the reasons outlined in the report. I have been notified that there are 2 items that fall into this category. That's part of item 6, the assurance session for the Cabinet Member, Digital Culture, Heritage and Tourism. The second part of the presentation will be private, and so part 2 of the presentation is exempt due to paragraph 3 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. And item 9, the equal pay update. There is exempt information in the appendix due to paragraphs 3, 4 and 5 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. So given that those 2 items are noted, obviously we will again note that they are to move into private session for members during those items when those items occur. Therefore I'd like to formally pass the following resolution that in accordance with Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 as amended by the Local Government Access to Information Variation Order 2006, the public be excluded from the meeting during consideration of those parts of the agenda designated as exempt on the grounds that it is likely, in view of the nature of the business to be transacted or the nature of the proceedings, if members of the press and public were present, there would be a disclosure to them of exempt information. Can I get that second? Thank you. I therefore have that resolved. Minutes of the Audit Committee, item number 5, minutes of the Audit Committee, 28th of September 2022, which in my absence, Councillor Tilsley kindly chair. Does anyone have any comments or issues with those? No, in which case I move that they are accepted and agreed. Agreed, colleagues? Agreed. Thank you. So therefore, I move on to our first substantive item, which is the item 6, the assurance session for the Cabinet Member for Digital Culture, Heritage and Tourism. Welcome to our meeting, Councillor Francis. And for those that are not regular followers of this committee, we invite Cabinet members to take us through their assurance, risk and issues with regard to external audit on a rotating basis to basically update the committee on issues within their portfolio and bring to the committee's attention any issues that the committee should be aware about. So I'd like to hand over to you, Councillor Francis. Our practice is to give you an opportunity to introduce your team and to update the committee on issues that update us on. The committee had a briefing prepared by the internal audit team covering the whole range of your portfolio, so they may well ask questions with regard to the presentation, but may also ask wider questions should they so wish.
Okay.
Councillor Francis, welcome.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for inviting me here today to give assurances, as the Chair said, around the risks highlighted on the risk register and those items raised by the external auditor and issues outlined on the annual governance statement that are included in my portfolio. I'm pleased to say that there are no issues regarding the annual governance statement. So my portfolio changed this year. Most of you will be aware. Last time round, I was cabinet member for education, skills, and culture. I've got a slightly changed portfolio brief, which includes digital heritage, culture, and tourism. And that's broadly set out to reflect what's going on nationally. So I set out my responsibilities for information. I don't propose to go through that line by line unless there are any specific queries which I'll be happy to address if I can. If we could move on to the second slide, please. Thank you. So slide 2 has a focus on libraries. And most people will be aware that following the return to a pre-COVID service offer, which saw full opening hours, etc., risk assessments within community libraries are being continuously updated, seeking to reflect the current conditions of the building and any future service developments. Maintenance work is currently taking place in several buildings that have been identified within the library estate as a priority issue. Those libraries currently include Sturgeley, Erdington, Kingsheath, Sutton Coldfield, Sparkhill, Perry Common, Handsworth, Smallheath, Birchfield, and Harwell. Now, condition surveys have been undertaken, and programme maintenance work will be aligned with the transformation of the library service. I was pleased only last week, and very sunny day like it is today, to visit Erdington Library with my colleague Dawn Beaumont, where we met with councillors Alden Moore, and we were there to look at a particular issue with regard to a leaking roof, quite a serious issue. And again, most of you will be aware that that particular building is a listed building, so we have a specific set of responsibilities for it. And it's always useful. I haven't actually done it, but it's always useful to get out and physically visit places, because it makes a difference being something firsthand. Of course, when you go, you can see some of the work that needs to be done, the repairs that are required to keep it into a good state for both our service users and staff and volunteers that work there. So what I take away from that as cabinet member is, notion of what work needs to be done, and then we'll go away and consider how that might be best addressed over the next few months. Libraries, as some of you will be aware, are part of the Early Intervention and Prevention Programme, and a new library service delivery model is currently under development. And that will seek to optimise the balance between the flexible use of the City Council properties and the opportunities that are presented within our library estate for different types of partnerships and perhaps different ways of working. Slide 3, please. As far as Commonwealth Games Legacy is concerned, we launched a plan last December, and that plan included short, medium and longer term plans and proposals identified. Now, work is currently underway to report back on achievements to date and to review medium and longer term plans and proposals 1 year on. Now, directorates are working against Commonwealth Games Legacy objectives within corporate performance structures. And we continue as a council to work with our regional partners and with government regarding a proposed £60 million legacy funding award. And can I emphasise that's a regional award, not just a Birmingham, and no firm decision has been made yet as to that spend, as far as I'm concerned. So we will continue to work with our partners and with government regarding the £60 million legacy funding, and we await more information as to how and when that will be distributed widely. I'm not sure if any of you watched or attended the Commonwealth Games Culture and Physical Activity Over Scrutiny Committee last week, as there was a full update on the legacy given by Cap Richard and attended by the leader. That's certainly available for you if you watched it. Slide 4 is around issues of tailoring to culture, heritage and tourism and capacity. That is very much to do with staffing for the team. We're trying to locate Simon Easton. It's going to be one of those instances where I have to lard on the chair or something like that. We don't know where he is. He's in the building. What I do know is that there's been some recruitment problems, and those aren't they're not isolated issues. The recruitment problems across local government challenges is we have a shrinking pool of staff and potential workers covering a very wide local government estate. But recruitment is underway for the roles highlighted, and hopefully they will be post by the end of the year. Now, you'll be aware that we had a very successful summer with the delivery of the Commonwealth Games, so the eyes of the world upon us. So the ask on us as providers of tourism and heritage services are growing all the time. And we really need the right people in the right roles to help us work alongside officers to deliver the important part of that legacy. Thank you. Slide 5, please. And moving that. Slide 5. This focuses on IT and digital. This is a newish part of my portfolio. And any data breaches and cyber attacks and potential. I know this issue was picked up in the external auditor's report, and it's very, very important, which is why I'm really, really pleased that Cheryl Duran, the Assistant Director for IT and Digital, is going to update the committee separately and answer any questions on that. Do you have any questions for me about what I presented so far before I hand over to?
That probably would be a good time just to pause and see if there are questions for the committee. Are there any?
That's right.
I have a question for you, Jane. But I'll just see if any other colleagues do.
I should do this for duration.
Thank you. So, if no other colleagues have a question, I would like to go back to your slide on heritage and libraries.
Okay.
Because I noticed there within that, a couple more before. Sorry, we can go back a couple more. The one before that.
There we go.
Libraries.
Yeah.
So obviously, I'm interested in this maintenance of older buildings and the challenges the council faces around cost, public safety, and general issues around the maintenance of that heritage estate, really, and what we're doing to ensure that we are mitigating against any risk, be it financial or otherwise, within that. Is that something you can talk about and give confidence to the committee about?
Absolutely. I think what's happened in recent years is that the library infrastructure of the estate has been slightly neglected, and that was probably further exacerbated during COVID when our libraries were closed down. So the reopening of our libraries and our library service has enabled us to be faced with some very large truths about some of our buildings that need updating. So we have, you'll be aware of the 30 community-based libraries in addition to the fairly iconic library at Birmingham. Some of those libraries are quite old. If to use Erdington as an example of something that's needs a bit of TLC, if you like, there's been a history of people going onto the roof and stealing the ledge tiles, and it's been replaced not as a new roof, but sort of sticky plaster type solution with flat sheeting. So it's that sort of issue that's not being addressed properly. Other libraries, every winter I can guarantee, I'm sure you do all the testify here, I can guarantee there will be libraries where the boilers don't work. And then we've got an issue that I've physically visited some libraries where staff have been walking around in coats and trying to keep warm, which is a very sad state of the 21st century. Boilers are often very expensive, and systems will need overhauling in that. There are things like broken down lifts and asbestos that's discovered. So there can be a whole host of ongoing maintenance issues. I suppose the concern for me as cabinet member is about some quite hard decisions that have been made in terms of spend and where the focus of the priority spend might be. And within that, if we're thinking about a slightly revamped library service and using the early intervention model, it's trying to consider how we get through the next 6 months. Winter is always our hardest time for library buildings. And then what can we do? What's our long-term plan of thinking, and what's the level of investment do we need to make in order to make sure that our libraries are fit for purpose? So that's an ongoing piece of work and thinking. I'm happy to do. Dawn, you want to add anything to that?
I would just add that's why we're doing the risk assessments. So we're working with social services to get every site risk assessed post-COVID. That's about the condition of the building, also about working conditions for staff in there, but then as well with an eye to what other services we might be able to deliver or how we might be able to develop and transform our service. So we're building in, looking at the current condition with what we might be able to do in a future.
No, thank you. Thank you.
I was going to ask a question.
Yes.
But in fact, it does be quite nicely from yours. I mean, one of the things that we have to do in Audit Committee is, ascertain value for money in terms of how we use our limited resources. So here's a big question for you. Do we need libraries anymore? Or are we basically supporting a dying service in that, as generations move on, more and more people will accept digital delivery. And I know a couple of years ago, we were in a situation where each book that was lent out from the central library was costing, I think, £14 to £15 per letting. Now, it would have been cheaper to buy those books on Amazon and send it to the resident than to actually loan the book from the library. So I'm not suggesting we close down all our libraries, but I am just asking the open question. Are we sort of flogging a dead horse, really?
I think the response you get to Councillor Jenkins very much depends on who you're asking the question of. We saw, for example, use of our libraries go up, increase, particularly during COVID when people were stuck at home. And if you can be reminded, what we have statutory duty to do is provide a library service. That doesn't necessarily mean that service has to be in a library building. I think what we're trying to do, and I know lots of other local authorities are doing this up and down the country, is looking at what they've got to see how a library service might be delivered slightly differently in conjunction with some different partners. So, for example, your experience, any of us can have a very different experience if we went to a particular library, because there are real differences in the type of use, the frequency of use. So you go to one particular library and you will see lots and lots of people on computers because they don't have access to IT at home. And I think that's something you'll see more over the winter months. You'll see other libraries which have a focus on sort of drop-in activities, so we play and stay or reading groups, or all sorts of things. So there will be different needs for different people. What I would...
Yeah. The big place. I mean, yes, okay. So there are glorified Starbucks in that, it's you can go there, you can use a computer, you can get
just jump in and make sure
you're borrowing books.
Make sure that moves more into the policy agenda.
Yeah,
I think there is a kind of, obviously there's a value for money question that I think has been answered there, but I do think it brings us on to this other point, which is once we have the current policy to maintain, right, in my view, we could have that debate in other points, that those buildings, we do have this quite considerable heritage building portfolio as a council. And I think that this committee should be concerned about how particularly that portfolio is managed going forward, given the risk around financial costs. Significantly, we talked about energy costs, but also in terms of what we've seen is that a bit of neglect over a couple of years results in a bigger problem later down the line, and that puts at risk both in more financial investment, but also puts the public safety at risk. I mean, for example, there may well be older buildings that still have issues that do need repair that may, within the portfolio, not necessarily specifically within the library portfolio, but that may well, if they don't get repaired, and if we keep putting off that repair, they create a public health risk as well. So I think, are we using, I guess my question, if other colleagues have got any other question related to this part, my question is, are we learning from our work on libraries and applying that to the rest of our heritage portfolio of buildings?
I would say yes. I don't know.
I think that libraries now being part of the early intervention and prevention programme is a step forward, and I would welcome that. When it comes to the use of spaces, we've definitely seen an increase post-COVID, particularly amongst the young. I think that they do need somewhere that is that trusted, neutral space where you don't have to buy a coffee and you don't have to register. So I think we are seeing an increase in that, particularly amongst our younger users. Now, I don't think that has to be amongst all those sites. It doesn't have to be standalone, but there is a need there. There is a need there for something. And it isn't, I agree with you, Councillor, it's not necessarily about books anymore. It is about those wider issues. It's about space. It's about the warm welcome, which we will be offering on behalf of the council across that estate. So I think we still do need some buildings. How we use them.
Indeed, and I guess that the culture and committee, security committee would be very interested in that conversation. I guess it's simply these buildings should cause us a little bit of concern because they're getting older. What are we doing to make sure we're mitigating against that issue of further decline for those buildings against that value of making sure we're
Is it a dying industry? And should we rename them WeWorks or like publicly funded WeWork, or whatever?
But it also applies to some of our heritage building collection too, and and our art collection. Right?
We're making sure that when necessary, we've got survey conditions for undertaken.
Yeah.
Now, if such a survey was put into the need for some vital work in order to keep the building going, that's where we might sit back and take decisions to do something about it or not. So it's making sure that the staff across the library estate have full information about what's needed. And from that, it's making sure that the staff working in those libraries feel absolutely fine and comfortable. Say, look, it's really cold in here, or look, I have to get a bucket out at night or cover some books. And I've seen evidence of that. So it's
just picking up on that staff and staff being comfortable and staff being aware. I mean, one of the things this committee has been very interested in is ensuring that a culture of proper risk management is kind of put out through the entire council staff network. Do you feel confident that the management and the staff working throughout your portfolio, particularly in these spaces, given the fact they could be at the forefront of some of those kind of risks, feel confident about understanding risk management and how that is then reported up the chain?
my region would be yes, but I will hand over to Dawn. We should have that close interface with staff on a daily basis.
Yes, and I actually think it's improved through COVID because we had to work so closely and we had to change the way we worked. So I think coming out of COVID, we understand our buildings a little bit better because we had to mothball them and then we had to bring them back again to the public. So I think we got to work with some different people across the council. I think it brought us all in a little bit more corporately. So I'm not saying it's perfect and there's a lot of work to do, but it's moving in the right direction, I think. Yes.
Thank you. My question.
Chair, from the capital programme last year, we did spend some money on libraries. For example, Acos Green, 14,000 was spent on the route to make sure it didn't deteriorate further. New boilers went into Porcelain, I think.
Yeah.
So there is work. There is also £4 million set aside, fully funded within the capital programme for libraries, which is pending a strategic review of how to spend that. So it's not being spent. It's been spent. It's pending a review and a strategy.
I don't think that probably does strike me as a thorough final question. We mentioned about theft of materials from our buildings. Where do we get to with that? How do we, are we working, have we had any success in kind of those people being caught and working with the police and to clamp down on that?
I suppose I work on the assumption that every criminal act like that, which either vandalises or leads to loss within the library, is reported to the police and the appropriate investigation takes place and we have insurance to cover for it. But it doesn't stop the the process. Staff have to stop what they're doing and take part in investigations and all the rest of it. So as far as possible, our focus for us, I think, should be on prevention of that sort of thing happening again. and making sure that our estate is as secure as possible.
Corporate landlord, we're working towards
Yeah.
corporate landlord, so libraries will become part of the corporate landlord, which they haven't in the past. So that may again increase that access to expertise, rather than library managers trying to be everything. You know.
Yeah. No, that's
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
Okay, colleagues, well, thank you very much for that help.
Chair, if I may, Simon Easton is one of my senior officers within the arts and culture. I dashed through the presentation bit on the slide. Is there anything that you want to add that will enhance the understanding of the audit committee here with regard to recruitment? I was talking about it being a national issue, but I didn't touch upon the policy shifts, which aren't necessarily part of your agenda today, but I'm giving you the opportunity to speak.
Yeah,
Well, thank you.
thank you, John.
We found you anyway.
I was next door, but anyway, thank you, Chair. No, just say very, very briefly, I think we're a bit of a victim of our own circumstance here. We're a very small team anyway, and one of my team was encouraged to go for a secondment with the Commonwealth Games programme team. One of my key members of the team, and she has done that, and she's coming back to us at the end of this month, which is great. Another of my team sadly has had a long-term illness, which has prevented her from being fully at capacity of strength. Having said that, the capacity of the team is under-resourced, and we've managed to get, as it says here, permission through our AD and Workforce Programme Board to recruit a cultural services manager below me, above the 3 grade 4s that I work with, and also a museums and heritage officer, because ever since we, if you like, inherited the contract with the museums, there hasn't been an additional museums heritage support person, which I think we badly needed and we made a case for. So those are under recruitment as we speak. And then in addition to that, in order for us to take through the pledge to deliver the new cultural strategy for the city next year, through public health funding, we've managed to secure some part-time posts to build on the statement of intent that we've been working on over the summer, which has been produced, and start to pull that team together to develop a cultural strategy. So recruitment is in process. I'm slightly behind the curve on this, but I hope to say that as a risk, it won't be this time next year.
Thank you for updating us on that, Simon. That is appreciated. I'm aware of time. I'm also aware that you have another presentation for us that we possibly need to move into.
And if I can have the tutorial, it's going to
It's going to be the title my presentation on the private section.
Is the entirety?
Yes.
Right. Okay. Interesting to get to that. So we will therefore have to move as having to ask that the cameras be turned off. We resolved already that we will move into a private session. Do I need a description as to why? Oh yes, of course. So this is because the presentation will indicate paragraph 3 option 12A. In which case I would ask that the cameras be turned off.
was a matter of cause. I just questioned who actually made a decision to put that into. Right.
So I made the decision on recommendation of officer. So, for us rejoining the public session of the audit committee. So we've had our private discussion around item number 6. The committee has heard from the cabinet member on the issue of digital customer services, and we have, as a committee, agreed that the discussion that we have just had, the presentation from it and the minutes of it will be put in the public domain, given the nature of the discussion. So I thank colleagues for returning. I have been asked the question as to why we moved into private session. We moved into private session on the advice of officers to the chair, and the chair accepted that advice, given the possibility of the nature of sensitive information. As the discussion progressed, sensitive information was not needed to be revealed into the debate, so therefore that discussion, a minute of that discussion and the presentation from that discussion will be put into the public debate to satisfy to give a correct and accurate minute of that meeting. We would also review again our methodology for putting items into practice.
If we say there is a possibility that something sensitive might be discussed, you could put the whole of every committee meeting into secret session.
I think it would be right, Councillor Jenkins, to understand what a reasonable threshold for that would be, and I've asked the city solicitor to develop a set of recommendations for us.
So it's got to be a very high.
We can focus that once the city solicitor has brought the recommendations to us. Okay, colleagues, thank you, and thank you again to Councillor Francis and her team for coming today to speak to us. That was very much appreciated. I now move on to item 7, the Birmingham Audit Annual Fraud Report 2021 to 2022, and I ask that the Assistant Director for Audit and Risk Management present to the committee. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, we'll just colleagues go on to the case. We cover the work that we do on boarding annual reports and half-year report, but this is a report just focused solely on work of the core team.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, John and Craig, for joining us.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is John Preston, and I'm the Group Auditor responsible for the Accounting Fraud Service within the Birmingham Audit. This is our annual fraud report for the financial year 2021 to 22. The report is to update the committee on the role played by Birmingham Audit in the investigation, prevention and detection of fraud. The Accounting Fraud Service is effectively made up of 2 smaller teams, the Corporate Fraud Team and the Application Fraud Team. The Corporate Fraud Team is responsible for investigating and preventing internal fraud and error and fraud against the council from external sources. That may be frauds perpetrated by staff or external suppliers or contractors, error resulting from poor practice, or frauds perpetrated by external scams. The Application Fraud Team predominantly deals with social housing fraud, such as subletting council houses and false applications to join the housing list. They also investigate fraudulently obtained council tax discounts, and more recently have been investigating frauds in relation to COVID grants and social care direct payments. Prior to joining audit in October of last year, I was an accredited financial investigator working within the Trade and Standards Service. That role provided me with specific powers to investigate financial crime, obtain bank account information, freeze and restrain bank accounts and assets, and recover the proceeds of crime. I've brought those powers with me to this role within counter fraud to enhance our ability to investigate fraud against the service. In paragraph 3.3 of the report, you will see that we are increasing our capability to investigate financial crime by training 3 officers on the Application Fraud Team as financial intelligence officers. This is the first step to becoming fully accredited financial investigators and gives them the power to obtain bank account information about suspect bank accounts and help us to trace the proceeds of fraud and criminal offences. Ultimately, we want to increase our ability to recover the proceeds of crime ourselves. In addition to our role to investigate frauds, we also play a significant part in preventing them. At paragraph 4.3 of the report, you'll see that we launched a Focus on Fraud Awareness e-learning package for all City Council staff last year. We have recommended that directorates encourage their staff to undertake the training to build their knowledge of spotting the red flags of fraud and reporting those instances to us. We've had positive feedback on its uptake and have since rolled out a specific version of the training to all Birmingham schools. In section 5, you'll have seen our figures for cases reported to the corporate fraud team. Whilst the number of cases reported to us have remained largely consistent, the value of those frauds has increased quite considerably this past year when compared with previous years. The value of fraud nationally is undoubtedly up as a result of COVID-19, and we have seen that trend internally. A significant amount of that fraud that had reported to us in 2021-22 can be attributed to COVID-19, and in particular business support grants. A number of those cases were investigated and closed with appropriate outcomes, including the recovery of some of the grant funds. Some investigations are still ongoing, and it is hoped that the most serious of those cases will result in criminal proceedings, with files already passed to legal services for consideration. During the year, we received details of 3 attempted payment diversions. This is where fraudsters pretend to be suppliers to the city and contact our finance teams asking for their bank details to be changed in the hope that we will pay them the account. There's been a national increase in this particular type of fraud and the sophistication of it. But fortunately, in all 3 cases, existing controls managed to prevent any funds being paid out incorrectly. The bank accounts that were linked to those frauds were reported to their respective banks so that they could take action to prevent further offending. Alongside reactively investigating fraud, we also place a considerable emphasis on proactively detecting issues and dealing with them swiftly to prevent any further concerns. We do this through data matching exercises, highlighting inconsistencies in information and identifying not only fraud and error, but areas of poor practice and procedural non-compliance. One area that is often picked up through this proactive work is salary overpayments, and we have identified a number of these over the past year. The circumstances of each overpayment is investigated to verify that the payments were not fraudulently obtained and that the appropriate management action has been taken to prevent a reoccurrence. Moving on to social housing fraud, you'll see at paragraph 6.3 of the report that we recovered 22 city council housing properties last year, which is up on the previous year. Cabinet office places an indicative cost of £93,000 per property recovered, giving us a total recovery value of just over £2 million. Our application fraud team will receive reports that a tenant has vacated their property and is allowing someone else to sublet or otherwise occupy. We use a variety of tools to investigate these cases and seek to recover properties where we can demonstrate that a tenant has breached the condition of their tenancy. For the more serious cases, we can also take criminal proceedings against those responsible. The team also cancelled 548 housing applications last year prior to properties being let, with a Cabinet Office indicative saving of £1.7 million. This action was taken after we identified inconsistencies in information provided by the applicants, and again, in more serious cases, we will also take criminal proceedings. In May 2021, Birmingham City Council employee and his wife both pleaded guilty to a total of 6 charges of fraud by false representation, after they admitted to a social housing and tenancy fraud discovered by our team. The couple had made false declarations on housing applications that they were effectively homeless, and on the strength of that were allocated a council property. At that time, they actually had over £95,000 in personal savings, easily bought or rented their own property. The value of the fraud was calculated to be just over £12,000, which represented what the couple would have had to pay to privately rent a property had they not been given a council house. They were both handed suspended prison sentences and had been ordered to repay the proceeds of their crimes. The employee was subsequently dismissed by the council, and housing were in the process of taking possession proceedings to recover the property. In paragraph 6.7, we also see that the team identified council tax fraud resulting in just over £336,000 worth of adjustments to council tax accounts. This predominantly relates to council tax account holders claiming a single person discount, despite having additional adults living at the address, or where they have failed to declare increases in their earnings, which would remove their entitlement to council tax support. In addition to requiring the account holder to repay the required council tax, we're also increasing our use of statutory penalties, so fixed penalty notices, and refer the more serious cases for prosecution. Finally, in paragraph 8, you'll see that our work on the National Fraud Initiative data matching exercise continues. This countrywide Cabinet Office-led initiative takes data from across a variety of public bodies and makes comparisons between the data sets for the purpose of identifying fraud and error. So far, we have processed just over 13,000 data matches, totaling £71,000 worth of fraud being identified. That concludes our fraud report for 2022.
Thank you, John, and thank you, and welcome as well, and thank you very much for your work on that. Do colleagues have questions? Councillor Tilsley.
Yeah, there's one. 5.9, you make the case of 3 attempted payment diversions. What was the value of those?
The value of
So
those was approximately £179,000 in total, have they been successful?
£60,000 a throw, then quite a considerable amount of money. Right.
Thank you, Councillor Tilsley. Councillor Jacobs.
Thank you. Firstly, John, thank you for what I thought was the best presentation we've had in a long time, principally because you didn't attempt to use PowerPoint. I've been begging the chair to stop people using PowerPoint, but yet they persist. Yeah, I know. Well, it's a point of disagreement, but I think the way you present that, but we're listening to you talking and we're not desperately trying to read words on the screen, is absolutely the way to do it. I thought it's short and concise and to the point. That's good. The question that I had, though, for you, you said about bank accounts. I mean, presumably you or anybody else, including the council, would have to get a court order before you could interfere with someone's bank account.
Yes and no. So the powers that I'm afforded as a financial investigator, I can speak to banks and make inquiries about that.
What's a financial investigator?
So a financial investigator accredited by the National Crime Agency to utilise powers under the Proceeds of Crime Act effectively. So that gives us powers to do certain things.
May I intervene? So it may be for this particular discussion, when we are looking at cabinet fraud issues, the committee may want to consider a bit exempt section of the agenda in order to have a full and frank discussion with members of the internal audit, because this is kind of highly sensitive areas where we're looking at strategies about how to prevent fraud against the council. So this may be a very good example, Chair, of where you wish to consider going into the private domain so that you can seek the assurances that you need to from internal audit and also protect their investigatory mechanisms that they have and the sensitive data, which I am absolutely convinced both Craig and John will hold.
At the moment, I'm only concerned with the principle. I don't want you to share any specific, but I'm fascinated by this idea that somebody other than a court could access someone's bank account. No. Well, I mean, if he's accredited by the National Crime Agency, that's a matter of, that's in the public domain, isn't it?
Sorry, stop.
I think we just have to protect the roles that internal audit have around some of this more sensitive investigatory work around fraud and some of the powers that they have available. So I think if my colleagues feel comfortable in answering quite a high level and look to Sarah for that overview, I just have to give that cautious watchword, Chair, that I would not be surprised if my colleagues indicated that they perhaps couldn't answer that question in the public domain. And that's not disrespect to this committee. It is just about protecting investigatory mechanisms that they may have available.
I take the notes of that. So
you don't have to tell me exactly how you do it, but we have a situation here where a civil servant or a council officer potentially, if I understood John correctly, could freeze somebody's bank account. Now, traditionally, that's been the role of the courts.
Can we get a briefing on that, Ross, and your powers to the committee? That be outside of the committee.
His powers are a matter of public interest. If he has that power, but it's jobs enough, the public need to know that, don't they?
If I could just say, we would require a court order. What you're talking about, would require court intervention.
There's a high level framework, and there's certain stages in that framework of information you can gain, and we would have to follow the legislative process for each of those gateways to obtain that information.
But it's an interesting point. So what you're saying, Craig, is that somebody such as yourself could obtain information about my bank account, right, without me knowing, because you suspected me of wrongdoing.
I think we need a full briefing and understanding of these roles.
Yeah.
And I think that would be helpful to get to grips with, because I think we do need to understand a little bit more about the powers of the internal fraud team. So if we could do some kind of briefing full members that can remain private and confidential as necessary. And that would be probably the best way of moving forward on this. Are there any supplementary questions you have regarding anything else, Councillor? Anything from Councillor saying, Councillor Lyons? No problem. In which case, I will ask my question of you guys. And I think this is a very positive and important report, and I'm very grateful to you for it, John and Craig. The only thing, and forgive me if I'm being slightly facetious, is this not just a real kind of sense of we've done some really good things here, and a kind of bit of a pat on the back kind of thing, maybe? But I noticed, so again, I go back to this issue. Where do we stand in terms of our peers, our core city peers, our sector as a whole, West Midlands Council? Are we doing it above average, and reaching to be the best case for local government on this issue? Or basically, are we doing very well, but there are other, we're still behind others? I guess the other thing that I asked is, I noticed you've assessed against the CIFA code of practice, and I just wondered what the outcome of that was and what kind of manoeuvring we're doing to continue on that continuous improvement.
So, the first part, I mean, I don't think there's any data specifically to compare us, but certainly there are aspects of our work, the data matching exercises, the use of interrogating council-wide systems to find inconsistencies, let's say we're ahead of the curve. And we get inquiries from the authorities who haven't yet implemented that, or looking to implement that, or maybe have started down that road.
One of the things that will be really helpful in future reports is to indicate that in somewhere on the basis where we think we're standing with the comparative organisations, and that as evidence would be really helpful to this committee.
There are other areas that we know we can do more. Social housing fraud, there are probably authorities in the country that are ahead of that and using different techniques, but we're working to that. Something we can improve.
Certainly on social housing fraud, we've implemented a strategy of prevention. So we do a lot of work around data matching to identify fraud before it's entered the council systems. Hence why we've got 540 applications stopped, which will identify an issue, a problem, which stops you having the housing that isn't entitled to the house in the first place. So whilst we're probably low in terms of the number of houses recovered, we're doing much better on the prevention strategy, which ultimately I think is probably the right strategy and the better strategy.
I think one of the things that would be quite helpful for the committee and certainly for myself is the report to have a set of a basket of indicators at the first page to really understand where we are on these things, because that sounds a really positive development, but the number's low here because it's high here, and I think that's really a good one. On the CIFA,
one we follow the framework, so CIFA set out a strategy framework of best practice, and we that framework in terms of detection, prevention, strategy, and having intelligence for help investigators, so rather than spending a huge amount of resource with an investigator with lots of inquiries, we have a small intelligence hub who do those initial inquiries and pass it on to the intelligence team. So our investigation resources are very focused on problems where they've got to do an investigation. All of the simple queries are dealt with by the intelligence hub. So in terms of the overall particular guidelines for fraud, we compare really well and consistently compared well against that framework. Having said that, obviously, we're constantly looking to how we can improve the detection, how we can stop fraud entry. And John mentioned a lot about the proactive work that we're doing. Over the last 2 years, we've done a lot of work around how we can use data to identify issues as early as possible. Such as the payroll, the payments, we actually take information across the council systems and match them together to identify if, say, somebody's either left the authority, it's on the payroll, or maybe they're on sick and the system's not being updated correctly. So actually, we've identified very proactively and as early as possible.
That's great. Thank you, John, and thank you, Sarah, for that report. I do very much value that. Any further questions?
No, thanks, Chairman. Thank you for the report. It's rather interesting, actually. What I couldn't pull from though is with your investigations, what is the proportion of its actual fraud or what is sort of human error or system error. And with regards to human error, system error, what do you do in preventing that? That's not your responsibility because you're identifying what the issue is. What is then done to sort of nip that one in and draw a line under that one in the future?
So I think, a good proportion probably are more procedural errors or information errors rather than frauds. And the payroll one is a good example. It's not somebody seeking to pay extra amounts of money. It's an accident by a manager failing to process the system properly. It means that they've got paid. For each of those investigations that we do, we compile a full investigation report. And at the end of that report is a set of recommendations for how we think that department, that team can improve their processes and put things in place to prevent that particular instance reoccurring again. Frauds change. Frauds does come up with all sorts of new ways of finding holes in things to attack it and get money. So we're constantly, obviously, keeping on the back of those trends, coming up with new recommendations for those areas to help frauds.
Where there's sort of common trends and issues, we feed those into the audit plan as well. So potentially, there's a lot of recurring issues, lots of recurring problems. It will start to feature in the internal audit plan, where we do an assurance piece of work as well across the whole of the City Council. So sort of take intelligence as well, but we gather from the broad investigations of fraud to feature in the audit plan process.
Thank you, Councillor Lyons, for the question. I'm going to bring that item to an end now and thank officers for attending. It's very much appreciated and look forward to keeping us informed on this subject. Thank you, colleagues. So we'll then, this is a recommendation to note the work. I haven't done my recommendations, have I? The recommendation is that Audit Committee members are to note the work undertaken during the year and draw assurance from the policies and procedures that are in place to detect fraud and error. So I can get that agreed that we have noted that report. Thank you, colleagues. Okay, moving on to informing the audit risk assessment for 2021 to 2022. 10 minutes for this allocated. We're running a bit late as it is. I think we still remain for Councillor Tilsley. So to Grant Thornton, to Nicola from Grant Thornton, and welcome to you're joining us online. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, mindful of time, so I will take the report as read, but draw out the important things for you. So this is an iterative document which has come to the committee in the past, so some of you may recognise it where you've been previous members, but it is refreshed every year to make sure we're aware of any changes or updates. It's a requirement of auditing standards that we make certain inquiries of Audit Committee, and therefore we're bringing this document to you as part of that process. It sets out considerations of the council's arrangements and oversight over a number of different areas. So it's assessment and mitigation of fraud risk, how it maintains compliance with laws and regulations, procedures in place for identifying related party transactions, whether there are any going concern issues for us to be aware of, and then there's a summary of the accounting estimates used in the preparation of the council's financial statements. Now, within the report is a section comprising a series of questions on each of those areas that I've just mentioned and the response we've received from council's management. That this follows the annual fraud report item is very useful because in particular we would seek your views as to whether you're aware of fraud risk and aware of any fraud, and clearly discussion in relation to the previous agenda item as well as the briefing note you've requested, and the management commentary in our report is evidence that you are. In particular, you'll note that in the appendix, we've asked management to set out their approach to those areas of estimate in the financial statements, the most significant of which you might recall are aligned to areas we've already identified as significant audit risks from our audit plan, being valuation of PPE, pensions and unequal pay. So what we do with this document when we get the responses back from management is consider whether there are any changes to our audit approach as a result of things that are brought to our attention. But we'd also like sort of the audit committee to consider whether the responses in this document are consistent with its understanding, and whether there are any further comments you might wish to make on top of what's already in there. As I said at the beginning, our risk assessment is an iterative process. We revisit this throughout the course of our audit. So even if you have no comments now, but something comes to mind later, then please do let us know. And on that note, I'll stop there, Chair, and invite questions and comments, please.
Thank you for that, Nicola. Any questions or comments from anybody? Thank you. As with all of this, we regularly get this list, the list of questions, and go through. And actually, I hope that you'll see from the discussion we've just had that this committee does continue to ask its own questions that you'd see similarly aligned to these questions to our to officers on these areas. How do you feel that this process and engagement has been, as smooth and effective as previous iterations?
Yes, it has, and in future it's worth being aware of when a new auditing standard that's coming in, which is going to require us to enhance this even further. So your future auditors for future years will no doubt step this up. I think it's relevant and appropriate that sort of management respond in the first instance as a starter for 10, if you like, and then it's useful for audit committee to be able to add their comments on top of that if they differ. But I think it's important for us as your auditors to seek confirmation from the committee or otherwise that you recognise your organisation from the comments that are in there, and if not, if there's anything else that we need to be aware of, that you let us know.
It's a good challenge back to us as a committee to think whether we recognise those answers. I think that I was looking through them, I felt that a lot of those answers have been put before us in our various engagement with officers on this. Are there any outstanding items that we think that we have discovered in this committee meetings that we'd I can't think of any at the moment, but I do think that's a challenge for future years on this site. So,
well, I was just going to say, Chair, I know Mohammed has talked about doing training for committee. There are some quite technical points on here that, unless you're an accountant, I mean, if you're an accountant, they're quite technical points. So I do think actually we can give you some assistance with this as part of that training, and then that will enable you to ask very good questions of officers, I think, and then back to the external auditor. So if you like that in the future, we'll certainly build that.
I think that would be helpful. I think we are trying to organise that. It's probably my fault not coming forward with the date on that. So yes, Sarah, I appreciate that. Excellent. Well, thank you, Nicola. So you've got your hand raised. We can't hear you. You're on mute.
Thank you. Sorry. It was just further to the point on training. Mohammed and I are sort of looking to do that training together. So you can ask us both questions at the same time. So we just need to get a date in diaries to make that happen. And hopefully it's then easier to find one date that everyone can make rather than two, and have two separate training sessions, one from Mohammed and one from ourselves.
I'd be keen for that to happen. And I think we'd be keen also to maybe come and visit you at the Gargoyles offices.
I think the point that Sarah's made is very relevant when you look at going concern page, and it refers to ISA UK 570 as interpreted by the practice note 10, audit of financial statements. Yes, we do need some further backup, Chairman, to be able to interpret that. But I mean, we are all laypersons basically looking at these notes and using our good knowledge and practice. And I would hope that Grant Thornton would draw any specific issues to our attention that need further explanation.
We're not bloodhounds, we're watchdogs. It's not up to us to be so knowledgeable in accounting that we can catch out people who spend their entire lives being experts at it. it's incumbent upon the officers and for that matter the contractors to draw to the committee's attention anything that you think we ought to know about.
Thank you, Councillor Jacobs. Point well made. I will therefore ask Nicola if she has any final points on this. But we have some learning for the committee there as well.
No further comments from me. Thank you all.
Thank you, Nicola, and thank you, colleagues. So therefore, I ask that Audit Committee members note that report. I get a note from somebody.
Great.
Appreciate that. And then we're going to move on to item 9, which is the equal pay update, the report of the City Solicitor and Monitoring Officer. And we will be requested to move to a private session. Given our discussion on what so far on private sessions, would the City Solicitor be prepared to set out to us why we need to?
Yes, Chair. Can I just introduce my colleagues as well? However, I've got Serena Angela, who is Head of Law for Employment at Legal Services, and Robert Harris, who's Senior Solicitor for Employment Law with a specific focus on equal pay. So may they be invited to the
They may do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So for the purposes of the private session, the public session of the meeting, Chair, you asked for effectively a time-out session on the council's position on equal pay, and you asked for some background details. So it's fair to say that this council is experiencing some current equal pay challenges, and these have been ongoing for some time. We've provided a public reference report for the purposes of this committee, and I do invite the committee to go into private session, as we've also provided a confidential report which is currently subject to legal privilege. So on that basis, I would ask that the committee goes into private session.
Thank you, City Solicitor. I therefore ask that we move into private session for this report item. Agreed? Thank you. If we can pause the camera. Thank you, everybody who's still out there watching us. We are back in public session now. We just had a report from the City Solicitor on equal pay, which the committee has discussed and is noted. And we note that just getting an agreement that we've noted that report. Recommend the committee notes the contents of the report and the exempted pay. Schedule of outstanding minutes, item 10. I think the only one from my side that hasn't been is the training session, but I think relies on me to get you some dates. Training session.
Yeah, we saw some dates like 50
The only other red was the issue around data security and cyber security, which we've had as part of Council Francis. So that if we can turn that one grey as completed, we can remove any discharged ones, and that leaves us just that red one. But obviously, we want to add a couple of new ones from today's meeting. I then move on to item 11, the date of the next meeting, which is scheduled to take place on Tuesday, the 22nd of November at 2 o'clock in Committee Room 6 in the Council House. To note that, and then to note any other urgent business. Any other urgent business from members? None given, and therefore I ask that authority to chair and officers chair to move in an urgent situation between meetings. The chair, with the relevant chief officer, has authority to act on behalf of the committee. Can I get that? So agree. Thank you. And I will ask that the maintenance looks at that door, seeing as we're back in the next meeting. So thank you very much, and that ends the meeting.